Today, the focus of our daily cancellation is a guy named Kyle Kulinski, who's a YouTuber. He has more subscribers than me on YouTube, but then I have more followers than him on Twitter. So the question of which of us is a better person remains therefore undecided. Guess we'll have to compare Facebook friends. Anyway, Kyle dedicated a segment of his show recently to addressing me and an argument that I've made about masking. The title of the video with this segment is Conservative Weirdo Really, Really Mad at Mask Wearers. I don't deny that I'm probably a weirdo, but not because of my masking stance. That is, without question, the least weird thing about me. Kyle is specifically upset with me over a recent tweet of mine on this issue. I believe I've already addressed this tweet on the show, but here it is for your reference again. I wrote, wearing a mask when it is not medically necessary is grotesque and unhuman, an attack on society itself. It feeds paranoia and fear. You're treating air like it's toxic and other humans like they're nothing but vessels of disease. It is disgraceful, arrogant, and offensive. Before we get to Kyle's rebuttal, let's just once again consider the point that I'm making. I stipulate that I am referring to medically unnecessary masks. I realize there are, for example, people with serious illnesses or compromised immune systems who might wear a mask and would have worn one before all of this. There are other scenarios too, like let's say you have severe allergies and you're out cutting the grass. I've always seen some people wearing masks because of that, no problem. I'm not talking about any of those categories or similar categories. What we're talking about is the medically unnecessary masking. So as for that, let's take it line by line here. I call unnecessary masking grotesque and unhuman. That's correct. The only problem here perhaps is the redundancy. It's grotesque because it is unhuman. Humans acting in unhuman ways are always grotesque. And I would say it's unhuman. It's indeed an attack on and a rejection of human society when you walk around as if each person who even passes by you on the sidewalk might infect you with a disease and kill you. To treat your fellow humans as disease-carrying rodents who are very likely to make you sick even just by being in your general vicinity for a few moments is, to my mind, severely dysfunctional behavior. It is not mere caution. Okay, a man who washes his hands periodically throughout the day and after using the bathroom, before making food, etc., is cautious and practicing good hygiene. We should all be cautious like that. But a man who scrubs at his hands for 45 minutes at a time until they're bleeding is not cautious. He's sick. He's deeply disturbed. And the masking that I'm referring to is worse in some ways than that because the masker is projecting his pathologies outward, broadcasting them, wearing them on his face, literally. I also say that it feeds paranoia and fear. I think that's pretty self-evident. It's the height of paranoia for a physically healthy person who's not at any significant risk of COVID, either because of vaccination or prior infection or whatever other reason, to walk around as though they might get infected if they allow themselves to breathe fresh air for a few moments. Paranoid? Yeah, absolutely, that's paranoid. And yes, it feeds paranoia in others. Again, it projects it outwards, encourages it, spreads it. Spreads it much like the disease that it's ostensibly supposed to be protecting from. As for disgraceful, arrogant, and offensive, well, yes, I would call it arrogant to treat your fellow humans like they're nothing but a threat to you, like they're sick, diseased, toxic, plague-carrying rats. I would call that arrogant, absolutely. Offensive? I mean, what does offensive mean? An act is offensive if it's insulting, rude, disrespectful, and derogatory. I do believe that the word offensive is way overused. I often complain about its overuse. But I never said that nothing is offensive. Obviously, some things actually are offensive. The word means something, and that meaning applies sometimes. Just because I object to its overuse doesn't mean that I object to its use, period. And in this case, yes, I would say it is offensive to treat other people that way and to treat society that way. Okay, so I have now reiterated my points and explained them. I've argued my case. I wanted to do that ahead of time before we got to Kyle's rebuttal of the conservative weirdo, i.e. yours truly. So I wanted to just, to set the stage, that's all of that, explaining it. Now let's listen to Kyle.
Now that the government agencies decided if you're vaccinated, you don't really need to wear it inside, conservatives are aggressively coming out to, I guess, do their version of an end zone dance. So there's this guy, Matt Walsh, who's a conservative commentator, and here's what he says. Wearing a mask when it is not medically necessary is grotesque and unhuman, an attack on society itself. It feeds paranoia and fear. You are treating air like it is toxic and other humans like they are nothing but vessels of disease. It is disgraceful, arrogant, and offensive. So now you have the anti-mask brigade is becoming militant in their anti-maskness. That's what we're currently watching. Look at the language he's using. So the government admits, like, okay, vaccinated people don't need to wear it inside. And this is what this guy's reaction is. Wearing a mask when it's not medically necessary is grotesque, unhuman, an attack on society itself. It feeds paranoia and fear, and you're treating air like it's toxic and other humans like they are nothing but vessels of disease. It is disgraceful, arrogant, and offensive. Offensive. These are the guys who call other people snowflakes 24/7. These are the guys who go after the libs for being triggered. These are the guys who make fun of safe spaces. It sounds like this guy needs a safe space from masks. So, listen, it's easy to dunk on this guy and have fun with it.
It's easy to dunk? Then why haven't you? Get around to it, Kyle. You can start dunking anytime if it's so easy. At least pull off a couple of windmills just to show us what you got. I mean, you're saying it's so easy to dunk on this absurd position from a weirdo, and yet all you've done so far is repeat my argument in an incredulous voice. That doesn't count as an argument. Raising your eyebrows and restating what I said in a mocking tone is not a rebuttal. A parrot could literally do that. A bird could do that. Just without the eyebrows, I suppose. But let's see if Kyle gets around to actually making an argument of some kind at some point. So let's continue.
You shouldn't be offended. If somebody's outside and they're not wearing a mask, that's fine. They don't need to wear a mask. Everybody relax. If somebody's outside and they are wearing a mask, they're being overly cautious, but that's totally fine. That's totally fine. If somebody's indoors and they're not wearing a mask and they're vaccinated, that's fine. If somebody's indoors and they're wearing a mask and they're unvaccinated or vaccinated, I think that's fine. I think it's fine. I don't know why this became the ultimate, like, culture war issue, but I just want to be clear that everybody participating in it looks colossally stupid. And honestly, looking back at a tweet like this in retrospect from the future, and this guy being considered an intellectual on the right, kind of embarrassing for the right. I mean, this guy saying stuff like this, it's like they're proudly wearing their anti-intellectualism, you know, and it's just sad. I just sort of feel bad for this guy who's 100% caught in the culture war and stuck, and he's like brainwashed by it to the point where he says deranged stuff like this.
Well, thank you for your pity, Kyle. I don't need it, though. Not for this, anyway. A month from now, I'll be going on a vacation with 4 kids, driving 16 hours, and I'll need your pity for that. So please store it up for that sort of emergency. As for the tweet you're responding to, I feel great about it. In fact, we are in the future right now, and I'm looking back on that, and I couldn't be happier that I said it. Especially because nothing you have said in response to it qualifies in any way as an argument. You seem very sure that my argument is incomprehensibly stupid, and yet you're unable to actually explain why. Your entire rebuttal is, yeah, but I think it's fine. I think it's fine. It's fine. I'm glad you do. But you say that I'm anti-intellectual. And I never claimed to be an intellectual in the first place. I could care less what label you put there. But to show off your own intellectual prowess, you have eviscerated my position with eloquent rhetorical flourishes like, he's a weirdo, this is stupid, and my favorite, I mean this guy saying stuff like this. That was my favorite counterpoint that you raised. I mean this guy, come on, saying this stuff, forget about it. Very profound points, Kyle. I don't mean to pick on you, but this is a serious problem these days, and you just provide us with a handy example of the problem. People seem to think that scoffing counts as an argument. They think that if they encounter an idea that they consider extreme, all they have to do is smirk and laugh and say, that's extreme, and that'll be sufficient to debunk the idea. It's not. And it's especially not in my case because I'm not embarrassed to be labeled extreme. I don't care. Extreme just means I've taken a position that's outside of mainstream thought. And considering that mainstream thought is so often shallow, superficial, half-baked, and misguided, I'm quite pleased whenever I find myself outside of it. And the mainstream thought on masking right now is that although masks have existed for hundreds of years and almost everyone went about their lives without them and showed their faces and breathed the air and interacted with other neighbors, with other people and their neighbors like normal humans, now all of a sudden, there ought to be a tectonic shift where it's considered normal or even advisable to cover your mouth and nose whenever you leave the house, as if the very air itself is radioactive. My point is that my extreme view is actually just the mainstream view of 15 months ago and every point before that. The only difference is that I am not floating with the tide of mainstream opinion. I'm not going to radically recalibrate my view of the world and of society every time our culture tells me that I should. If that's your approach, so be it. But it's not. And so for that reason today, unfortunately, I have to say that our friend Kyle is canceled. Hey, listen, hit the subscribe button. Do it right now. I demand it. And I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.